It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense. Importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host. Appreciate you joining with us this morning. Thank you. You know, we're running across some dangerous territory here with the proliferation and the expansion of executive orders. And we're going to touch on that today, along with a couple of other topics. I also want to talk briefly this morning about the fact that our veterans are to be honored today. Today is the 11th, November 11th. And as a result, I want to start with the concept that we need to recognize the fact that our veterans have really sacrificed and put forth an enormous amount of effort to follow their heart, to follow their truest belief in our republic. Granted, the people in leadership may be misleading. They may be sending them in the wrong places, doing the wrong job. But their motives, their spirits were true. And so we owe them a debt of gratitude and our allegiance and our support for their efforts, because irrespective of how misguided the leadership may be that's directing their actions, these men and women put their lives on the line every day for what they believe is their American value. And, I think it's important that we give credit where it's due appropriately to those people that have sacrificed so much for us, not only in current and recent periods, but down through history. Americans have always stood up at the right moment to take control of a situation that they felt was, egregious. When we learned about the atrocities being committed in World War II and things like that, we always stepped up and did the right thing. Our nation has been very, very generous, not only with our treasure, but with our blood in reference to protecting and helping and saving and stepping in where needed, not only domestically for our own nation's benefit, but also for those people who live in foreign nations. And so when we look at things like World War II in Britain and France, we really stepped up to the plate to make sure that those countries were reinstated, if you will, back to their, and all of Europe. It wasn't just limited to those countries, but all of Europe. I think that, Americans, and I know a number of folks that after 9/11, they felt that it was their patriotic duty to step up to the plate and help defend our nation. And, of course, many of them are probably very disillusioned now with what's transpired since, but that doesn't take anything away from their efforts and the sacrifices that they've made. And I think we want to make sure that we're clear about that, and that when we have an opportunity to, we provide the appropriate congratulations to those veterans for, one, following their heart and their spirit and the true spirit of American exceptionalism, and two, for the sacrifices that they've made, not only to their families and to their communities, but also to themselves. We have a ton of veterans that are coming back from decades of war, all, in many cases damaged irreparably, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And, it's our obligation to make sure that we're supporting and taking care of those men in a way that is fitting for their efforts. So if you're a veteran out there, personally, I give you my thanks. I give you my support. And having a veteran in my own family, my son, as many of you know, is overseas, and I'm very appreciative of the effort and the honor and the dignity and the integrity that you've put into your work. Thank you. The 4 topics we're going to cover this morning are the Executive Order Snowstorm that is about to hit the United States of America. You know, our president is now that essentially the issue of his agenda is under threat, he is descending to essentially utilize executive orders where he cannot get his agenda pushed through Congress. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a dangerous place for us to be, and we should recognize it and understand exactly the depths of the depravity of this particular methodology of passing an agenda or passing an agenda on. You know, this president reminds me of a guy whose plane has been hit, and you know he is literally at this point scrambling to try to put the pieces back together to force through what, quite frankly, his holders and his supporters have paid him to do, which is bad enough that we even recognize it as that. But to go beyond and outside of Congress is completely unacceptable. You know, we have a constitution that declares how the system is supposed to operate. And so we should really make sure that we are following that, because otherwise, we may as well, we're descending into a third world country and a third world dictatorship at that. Our second topic is going to be Iran sanctions and how they've been lifted in advance of negotiations. Now, come on, folks. You know, you don't have to be, a highly trained executive merger and acquisition specialist to recognize that you don't give concessions to the people that you're negotiating with in advance of that negotiation. I mean, really, it's just it's horrific, because it shows you the level of ineptitude that is associated with this administration. You know, there's an article out there on Atlas Shrugs 2000, or Atlas Shrugs, I should say, by Pam Geller, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce her name. And she's got a comment out there that I think pretty much sums it up. Sounds like Obama decided to enter the Persian nuclear bazaar to haggle with the masters of negotiation and has had his head handed to him. Bingo. You know, honestly, they are staunch negotiators. They are very, very skilled at it. And these guys, Kerry and Obama, are walking in there like lambs to the slaughter. The problem is that the decisions that they make don't just affect 315 million people here in the United States. They affect billions around the planet. And it's presumptuous to assume that John Kerry and Barack Obama have the fortitude, the capacity, the skill, the wisdom, the knowledge, the insight, and even the right motivations to negotiate this. I posted an article up this morning on our Facebook page about how the Saudis have, quote, paid Pakistan in advance for nuclear weapons, waiting for delivery because they have basically signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and theoretically, by taking possession of those weapons, they would violate that Non-Proliferation Treaty. So, skilled as they are, they basically have donated and paid literally hundreds of millions of dollars to Pakistan and purchased their weapons in advance and then just not accepted delivery, quote unquote. They already have the missile capability, by the way. That's been established for a decade or more. What they need now is the warheads. This is a dangerous game that we're playing here in the Middle East. And because of our tangled alliances, which George Washington, staunchly recommended, and our direct contravention of that, we're smack dab in the middle of it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not a good place for America nor the world to be. Our third topic is Obamacare, unions, and capitalism. And we're going to talk a little bit about how Obamacare or President Obama, I should say, has designated that the unions are going to get their moment in the sun, if you will, as a payback for the issue of their support for him. Now, if you're following what's going on with that, the unions have been demanding that they get exemption from health care, Obamacare. And it looks like they're going to get it. I mean, they've pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into his campaign, and now they're calling their chip. This is, and meanwhile, by the way, there's a group, and this was an article in the New York Post, which I'll reference when we get to that section. There's a group of individuals who have put together a capitalist version of healthcare. And they're out of New York, by the way, which is interesting because that is the heart of anything other than capitalism. And the article is titled Meet Oscar. That's what they're calling this program. The startup that may revolutionize health insurance. And logically, they started with the premise that health insurance companies should relieve, not create headaches. Wow, what a concept. Imagine that. Utilizing capitalism to solve our problem. Interesting. What an amazing concept. God forbid we do that, because that would take power away from the state, quote unquote. Our fourth and final segment will be the Ministry of Propaganda's lack of credibility. There was an excellent article also in the New York Post, which, I'll be honest, I don't generally follow the New York Post all that much. It has a tendency in a lot of ways to be more of like a tabloid paper than it does to be a real newspaper. But there was an excellent article in there by Michael Goodwin, and we're going to cover that extensively because I got to tell you something. This guy really wrote one heck of an article about how the sycophantic Ministry of Propaganda is literally falling all over themselves as lapdogs to try to support and defend and protect and give cover to what everyone in the nation can clearly see is a series of boondoggles, if you will. Starting with not just healthcare, but also incorporating things like the issues of the IRS and NSA and all the rest of this stuff. So, all right, let's jump into our first topic. The issue of executive orders is heavy right now because what we're seeing is a president who has already stated to us, and so there's no denying the reality of his intent, that if Congress won't act, I'll act unilaterally to solve those problems. Now, that was a quote straight out of his own mouth. I apologize because I'm paraphrasing. I don't have that quote in front of me. But essentially his argument was this. If Congress won't move fast enough to employ the agenda that I have determined what America is, the direction America is going to head, I'm going to do it through executive order. And I got to tell you, that is a national example of bullying. It's completely and totally unacceptable. That is not the way our nation works. That is not the way our system of government works. That is not the intent of our founding fathers. That is nowhere in the Constitution. It is totally and completely against the Declaration of Independence and any of the ideas and concepts that were the foundation of our nation. He said at a Democratic fundraiser on Friday night in Miami, what we've seen over the last several years is a constant ratcheting up of partisanship that prevents us from moving forward on things I think most people would say aren't Democrat or Republican ideas. They're just good common sense American ideas, energy independence being one of them. Stop right there. First of all, this defies the concept of critical thinking. When you put a false assumption out there and you state it as an empirical fact, and then everything else is based on that false assumption. First of all, the partisanship that's out there is not as much related to the issue of the separation between Republican and Democrat as it is an attempt to stop an unwanted dramatic drive and a ratcheting up of socialistic, Marxist, and fascist tendencies that our government is taking. And those few voices in Congress who are actually disputing it shouldn't be looked at as if they are being partisan. They should look at it as if they are partisans. I disagree with the concept that the ratcheting up of partisanship has prevented us from moving forward. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Obama, we don't want your brand of forward. We don't want it. We disagree with it wholeheartedly. Yes, I get the fact that you have bribed your way via largesse of the Treasury into the hearts and minds of literally millions of Americans. But even those people are finding out that there's everything wrong with your agenda. Even those people are realizing just how dangerous your agenda is to their own pocketbook and to their ability to remain independent of government. The truth is that this administration is working dramatically to change the landscape, the regulatory landscape in this country via the EPA, and the Environmental Protection Agency is literally unleashing a snowstorm of paper. They are putting in place regulations which have zero constitutional grounds for existence. Remember that the Environmental Protection Agency is an extra constitutional agency to begin with. Now, look, I want clean air, and I want clean water, and I want protection of our environment just like everybody else. But sitting there and saying that we're going to demonize oil, gas, and coal as our energy sources when we don't truly have an alternative to that is insane. That's not a way to run a country. You know, this reminds me of the equivalent of saying, I'm quitting my job today, and your best friend looks at you and says, oh, well, okay, so you found a better job? No, I didn't. I'm just going to quit my job. Well, what do you mean you're quitting your job? Have you got a better job lined up? No, I don't. Well, what are you going to do for money? I don't know, but we'll worry about that then. Whoa, stop right there. You got a wife and kids and a house to support. You've got a family to feed. How are you going to deal with that? You see, the problem here is that what they're looking for is the true goal of this administration, and the agenda associated with this is not so much about saving the environment. Their goal is to drive up costs on energy, with the simple idea that by doing that, they are feeding their corporate partners in their corporatocracy and essentially stripping Americans, again, of the middle class, of their wealth. Remember, they're subsidizing the poor on their energy costs. You know, there's a million different programs out there for energy reduction and their costs associated with that. But the truth of the matter is that the real goal here is not so much to protect the environment. It's to punish America for being America. That's the goal, folks. And everything else is a bunch of marketing around it. They want higher taxes and they want higher costs on domestic oil and gas and coal. And they want to reduce coal's use as a means to create electricity, which, according to the president's own quote, under my plan, electric costs would necessarily skyrocket. Well, bear in mind, Mr. President, we can't afford any skyrocketing anything right now. We can't afford to feed our families. Oh, I get it. That falls right into your plan. Strip the middle class of every vestige of any ability to, one, be self-reliant and dependent or independent upon their own capabilities and wherewithal. And again, you add to the morass, you add to the volume of those who become dependent on government largesse, who then have no alternative but to remain in that position of forced, coerced slavery because they can't afford the basic necessities of heat and electric. And then meanwhile, you'll pay for it with taxpayer money, which is also being siphoned off, again, from whom? The middle class. So it creates a circle of dependency and a a self-evident. Well, let me put it to you this way: the idea is that, and this story's got an excellent comment on it, which I want to read to you, because the idea of this approach to energy and demonizing that which we know works and which, quite honestly, we don't already have an alternative to, is insane. Dan Kish, the senior vice president for the Institute of Energy Research, says, quote, "It's very apparent that the real intent is to make oil and gas more expensive in order to make the heavily subsidized, unreliable, and costly renewable energy programs that they are pushing more cost competitive." So, I ask you this. Where did we ever hear this before? Oh, that's right. We're embroiled in it right now. It's called Obamacare. We're going to fleece the folks who can afford it to pay for those who can't. And this is no different. We're going to fleece those industries that can, and the people thereby who benefit from them, to cover the costs of those which are not really viable. The guy goes on and says, and this is very interesting. Listen to this quote. "This is the Tanya Harding approach to energy. Break your opponent's kneecap if you can't win fair and square." Wow. That is an absolutely astounding analogy, and one which is absolutely accurate. They can't win on the legislative side, so they're going to do this by issuing executive orders. And I got to tell you, executive orders were never intended to create law. Constitutionally, that is a limitation preserved exclusively for Congress. The courts may not do it, the executive may not do it. No one may make law except Congress. And because Congress will not acquiesce, he's going to do an end run around them and utilize these executive orders in their place. Ladies and gentlemen, that is tyranny defined. It's always this flowery nonsense around it. You know, Obama recently said, making sure we're investing in the best schools so that our children can compete in this new global economy, rebuilding our infrastructure. How many times have we heard that sycophantic nonsense? And not just our energy infrastructure, our ports and our roads and our bridges and our air traffic control systems, so that we stay on the cutting edge, making sure we're investing in research development. We have a whole drawer full of good ideas, and some of them I can do on my own administratively. The heck you can. The heck you can. You have absolutely no right to act as some kind of a bananic republic dictator. This is a nation of law, and the rule of law is based upon and established in two documents. The Declaration of Independence, which clearly tells us that if you continue in this path, we will be forced to remove you from power. And the alternative document to that, which is the Constitution, which outlines what your power limits are. Your power limits are established, sir. And if you continue along this path of insanity, demanding that you be the sole and unilateral arbitrator of all things, then you are forcing this nation into a position where we will be forced to follow those principles and concepts outlined in the Declaration of Independence. You have become a usurper. The truth is, this is acting in a form of tyranny, and frankly, I've had enough of it. The Weekly Standard has an excellent article out there, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find all of these in that first section where you see I think it's comment section, not comments, the show description section. I always put the links in there, so don't send me email or say, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. The links are right there. The truth of the matter is, this article in Weekly Standard is interesting. It's called Obama's Regulatory Rampage. Fasten your seatbelts because the courts and Congress won't be able to slow it down much. You see, that statement in and of itself tells you what you need to know about the danger of where we are. This is supposed to be a republic. Not a banana republic with a K at the end of it, but a republic. Here's what, this is the president's own words. Where Congress is not willing to act, we're going to go ahead and do it ourselves. Excuse me, that sounds just like it's right out of the mouth of a Mussolini or a Pol Pot or a Mao or one of the Kremlin members. Who do you think you are? The truth is, his second term is an absolute unmitigated disaster. And so now, in an effort to save it, he's going to sit there and institute executive orders that, granted, can be withdrawn by another president in the future. But that's assuming, for argument's sake, that the House doesn't capitulate and allow 25 million brand new voters to make sure that the tide is forever changed against anyone with a conservative ideal. A constitutionally conservative ideal. Not this rhino conservative that John McCain and his ilk want, but real, true conservative ideals that are based and founded on the Constitution. I'll tell you what. Congress needs to act. And Congress needs to act to withdraw the capability and the wherewithal for this president to continue to act this way. The truth is, if they're not going to step up to the plate and do the right thing by us, the American people, then in line with our Declaration of Independence, they have to go as well. I hear, and I see people say, oh, you can't talk like that. Yes, we can. You see, that's exactly the point. This is our nation. It is not Barack Obama's nation. It is not the nation of John Boehner. It is not the nation of Harry Reid. It is not the nation of Nancy Pelosi or Graham or Hillary Clinton. This nation belongs to the American people. And we are the best arbiters of our own final destiny. I've had enough of it. And meanwhile, they're bungling every other aspect of this administration's tenure. Look at our international policy. It is an absolute atrocious mess. I mean, as foreign policy goes, if you look at the room of foreign policy, it looks like about 10 frags were thrown in there and somebody slammed the door. Everyone is against us, and in large part because of the absolutely ridiculous positions that this nation has taken. I resent it. And I resent the fact that because of his mistakes, we're all going to pay. You see, the mistakes he makes don't just affect Barack Obama and the 5,000 people in this administration. They affect 315 million Americans. And that's not a true representative government when the government is going out and doing their own thing and determining what our future is going to be without even questioning what our needs and desires might be. There was an excellent article you should go check out. It's on our Facebook page and it's up on our website at americasvoicenow.org. It says, Why the World Hates Obama from Front Page Magazine. And I got to tell you, it's pretty accurate. The accuracy of the claims in that article are just and legitimate. All right, we're going to take a break. We're up against a hard break here. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to tackle our second topic, which is Iranian sanctions were lifted in advance of these negotiations that are going on now with Iran, and everybody's in an uproar about it. Not just Israel, although admittedly, they're the ones who would probably stand to be the most injured or the most immediately injured. But in addition to that, there are plenty of other nations, and everyone's coming out saying, what are you doing? All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host here. You can find us on the web by visiting us at americasvoicenow.org. You can find our Facebook page there at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. If you're a member of Facebook, please like it. If you're not a member of Facebook, because that helps us to spread our message within your circle of influence and for you to do the same. If you're not a member of Facebook, fear not, you can still go there and read the articles and find out what we have to say about things. You can read our comments and comments of our listenership. And then also, we post everything up to YouTube, where we have not only a video, but also an audio stream. And on our website, we also have the ability for you to capture the audio, if audio only. We've been recording it in podcast for you, especially for those folks who want to just download it and then listen to it at their leisure on a mobile phone, what have you. So, all right, you're listening to America's Voice. We'll be back in just a moment. My name is Michael Evans. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. You know, we're in a point here where we are making decisions that affect the nation and affect the world. And I got to tell you, the ineptitude about this and the incompetence with which this administration goes about achieving its own agenda in direct opposition, quite frankly, to probably what most of America wants and is really truly beneficial to the world is astounding. The truth is that in these negotiations with Iran on the nuclear agenda, we are in a position where we are negotiating with, quite frankly, the masters of negotiation. You know, in my business life, I have, and this is not meant as some kind of a slant on on Persians or what have you, but I got to tell you, they are sharp negotiators. It's my own experience that when you're negotiating with Persians, they are a tough group. I can tell you this from my own personal experience. They are, America, for whatever reason, doesn't want to negotiate on things. If you look at when you buy something, most people in the country don't understand the principle of negotiation. They just kind of assume that, that's the price. Let me tell you, that's not the way it works in most other places in the world. And it definitely doesn't work that way in Persia or in Iran or anywhere in the Middle East. These people are sharp negotiators. They've been doing it for thousands of years. And the United States, of course, because we're an economy that is built almost exclusively on consumerism, 70% to be exact, what that tells us is that we have been indoctrinated into the concept that you should always just pay whatever the asking price is. And the proof of that is if you've ever been over to a foreign place in Europe or anywhere in the Middle East or anywhere in Africa or anywhere in Asia, and you walk in to buy a trinket or to bring home to your kid, if you do not negotiate, they look at you with utter disdain. Their pricing is set exclusively high with the idea that you're going to negotiate. And of course, these stupid, idiotic visitors go in there and say, oh, okay, that sounds cheap compared to what I'd pay for it in the United States. It's ridiculous. And by the way, this isn't limited to just Europe and Asia and the Middle East. Anywhere in South America, same thing. Every continent but the USA, that's the reality of the world. And what essentially has happened here is that this president has gone in and lifted sanctions on Iran months ago. in anticipation of these negotiations. You gave away the one strength, the one effective tool that we had to negotiate on this issue. You don't lift the financial pressure, which is the thing that drove them to the table in the first place, before you've even actually gotten a chance to sit around a table. An absurd principle. It's the number one rule of negotiation, that you use everything that is your strength to accomplish your goal, which is to get the best item at the best price. And in this case, the best item is to deny nuclear capabilities to Iran. And the price should be when they have given us what we want, which is their refusal or their new position that they will not utilize nuclear weapons, then we give them back what they want. The $50 billion we've got tied up in these offshore accounts that we've been holding since the Shah. The ability to sell their oil on the open marketplace. The ability to have currency transfers. That's what they want. But they want that and the nuclear ambition as well. This is, and of course you got John Kerry out there who's so desperate to build his own legacy that he's willing to sacrifice, 7 billion of us on the planet to let that happen. Make no mistake about it. For the Iran to get nuclear weapons changes everything. There's an article I posted up this morning on our Facebook and website about how Saudi Arabia has already, long ago, purchased their nuclear weapons because they understood that if they ever wanted to be in a position where they were going to have the ability to defend themselves, that they would have to be at least capable or at least have the wherewithal to defend themselves or at least have the idea of a deterrent of nuclear weapons. And so the BBC reports this morning the Saudi nuclear weapons are already on order and paid for in Pakistan by the Saudi Arabian government. It's invested very heavily in order to avoid a non-proliferation treaty violation. They just haven't taken delivery. They've already bought and installed the missiles a long, long time ago. The only thing they don't have is the warheads. And interestingly enough, based on the observations of satellite imagery and so forth, the way that these silos where they have these missiles are pointed is already directly pointed at two nation states, Iran and Israel. Now, how can that be, you say? Well, if you don't understand the context and the complexity of the Iranian and Saudi Arabian relationship, you just don't get the idea of what's going on in the Middle East. One is a theocracy and the other is a monarchy. And the Saud family doesn't want to lose their grip on the nation. And they hate the Iranians. And the Iranians hate the Saudis. And the Saudis have already made it very clear that they would not allow Iran to have nuclear weapons without being in possession of them themselves. Now, I got to tell you something. And this comes from Gary Seymour. Until March of 2013, he was the Obama administration's counterproliferation advisor. Here's what he told Newsnight. Quote, I do think that the Saudis believe that they have some understanding with Pakistan that in extremis they would have claim to acquire nuclear weapons from Pakistan. In extremis. It doesn't take in extremis. All it takes is them to say, we want what we paid for. And we do know that Pakistan has been a broad exporter of nuclear technologies. In the 80s, they bought dozens of CSS-2 ballistic missiles from China. They're already sitting in silos pointed at Iran and Israel. And the truth of the matter is the only thing that they're missing is what? The warheads to make it all happen. The problem here is that we are fiddling around. You know, it gives me the impression or the analogy of, you know, we've got a room full of explosives and loose gunpowder laying all over the place. And, you know, you send a child in there with a book of matches, the child being President Obama in this administration, and with absolutely zero concern for the implications of those actions. It's just insane. These people are unprepared, incapable, inept, and the truth is, they're not the ones who are going to pay for whatever mistakes they make. We are. And he's negotiating from a position of weakness right from the get-go. The truth of the matter is, we're not in a position where we are negotiating in good faith. Simon Henderson, who's the director of Global Gulf and Energy Policy Program from the Washington Institute, here's what he said. The Saudis speak about Iran and nuclear matters very seriously. They don't bluff on this issue. Now, to make matters even worse, Saudi Arabia has broken diplomatic ties with the United States over our policies in Afghanistan and our policies in Syria. And what you really need to understand is that because they are the protector, if you will, of the U.S. petrodollar agreement, or a party to it, I should say, but therefore it's protector because there's something in it for them, we're already on a tenuous thread with them. To me, it makes, and by the way, we have outfitted them with the most, I mean, talk about a proliferator of weaponry, right? Here we are pumping, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weaponry into Israel and simultaneously handing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weaponry over to Saudi Arabia. And those two are age-old enemies. And you know, we're sitting back there funding both sides and you know, trying to hope that nobody's going to spark a Bic lighter in the middle of the powder room. The heck is that? What kind of a policy is that? And by the way, this isn't limited to just to President Obama. This has been going on for decades. This guy is just the last in a long line of irresponsible, inept, and incapable individuals to get over there and stick our nose in where it doesn't belong. I'm telling you that the simple truth is, and this is not an American protectionist concept, but we should avoid entangling enterprise with other nations. I mean, that admonition from Washington was well-deserved and honestly should be followed. Entangling alliances do nothing but embroil us in their problems. And then we're forced to take sides. And how do you take sides when you're allegedly allies of both? I mean, it's ridiculous. And then we're forced to sit like Solomon in judgment and to decide how many pieces the baby should be cut into. It is insane. I'm not suggesting it's as simple as, well, let's just pull everything back here into the United States and guard our own borders. I don't think that it's that easy. But I can tell you this. The Saudis consider themselves the patriarch, if you will, of the Arab world. And the truth of the matter is that they will not allow, and they've got the money to handle it, without a doubt. And we've given them the technological capabilities, and that which we haven't given them, they can certainly buy. Remember now that Saudi Arabia is one of the wealthiest nations on the planet, in large part just because of their oil reserves. And whatever they don't have, they can afford to buy. You know, it's like Bill Gates in a pinch. I mean, the guy can buy anything he wants. The truth is that all of our international relationships are degenerating. And it's been a long, long train of abuses of those relationships and our positioning in the world that have put us in this position. But this president is the last in a long line of individuals who have, for all intents and purposes, not understood the person that they're in negotiations with. They don't understand the culture. They don't understand the implications of it. They just go in thinking that because we're the biggest bully on the block, we're going to get what we want by force and intimidation. And that's imperialism, folks. We're not in a position where we can bluff and bluster our way through this, because nuclear weapons are something that changes the entire import of the entire conversation. We're not sitting here negotiating about a couple of chess pieces on the board. We're negotiating about the building that the chessboard sits in, upon which the pieces sit. Big difference. I'll tell you, we are in a position here where we have zero political advantage, and the only thing that we've got is our power, the projected power that we can use, but more like a bludgeon than a surgeon's knife. And that leaves us in a very, very precarious position, and an untenable position in terms of negotiation. Because remember that with nuclear weapons and with nuclear capabilities, everybody's on an equal footing suddenly. Assuming that they've got, intercontinental delivery mechanisms, the truth is that we're all on the same footing then. And all of the bluff and bluster that we have doesn't do any good. It's like the biggest guy in the room. Let's take a professional football player. The guy's built, he's gigantic, he's, and he understands how to fight. But if the opponent that he's up against is a small guy who's doesn't have the wherewithal to withstand the blows, but if he puts himself in a position where he's got body armor on, suddenly he's just changed the entire balance of power. And this is no different. Iran is wearing body armor. And what we don't know is that they've got a pistol secreted into their waistband. Israel is upset with us, and rightly so, because they understand that what we've just done is lifted the sanctions that brought Iran to the table in the first place. That is insane. And it will also create a problem for them where we're forcing their hand. And then what are we going to do? Come out in condemnation of them when they take action unilaterally? You see, the problem is that we're now burning the candle at not only both ends, but we've scraped away the wax in the middle, and we're burning it in the middle too. This is dangerous territory, because the implications of this have not only implications domestically for us, but it changes the world power struggle. The state of power in the world will be shifted. The truth is, nobody should have the nuclear weapons. Not us and anybody else. But to believe that that would be some utopian state of affairs that's achievable would be the height of stupidity. They exist. We can't change that. We can't put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. So the best thing that we can do is make sure that not everybody's got access to their own genie. You know, while this administration is out there fumbling around like the Keystone Cops, trying to negotiate a concept that they don't even understand, with a people they don't grasp, with a culture they don't understand, and who are some of the best negotiators on the face of the planet, this administration is trying to do internationally what it's done domestically. So Iran's going to get to keep its nuclear weapons, and Americans lose their health insurance and get racked down the executive order slide into total tyranny. Gee whiz, thanks a lot. Whose side is this administration on anyway? The truth is, we are at a moment where, you know, we have to really consider the impact of where all of this progressivism and liberalism has taken us, domestically and internationally. The idea that we can, and by the way, just for the record, you know, and I know this is a little bit of an aside, but it's important here. Did you know that Australia came out yesterday and made a very, very emphatic statement? They had instituted a new carbon tax involved with the issue of global warming, right? Climate change, whatever you want to call it. And they came back to the UN yesterday. You know what they said? Socialism masquerading as environmentalism must end. And they will no longer be a party to it. They will not sign up to any new contributions. They will not participate in any more tax schemes. They will not accept any more charges, nor will they accept any more dictatorial proclamations from the United Nations. The truth is, socialism and this liberalism and this progressivism that we have been following as a nation have placed us in a position where we no longer have a level of credibility from which to position and negotiate ourselves. It is an absolute ridiculous assumption to believe that these guys are sitting here telling us we're on the edge of a breakthrough in negotiations, when the truth is they don't even know who and what they're negotiating with and for. And we only get one crack at this, ladies and gentlemen. There's only one chance to get it right. And if you trust these bumbling idiots to do it, holy smoke, have you latched onto the wrong horse team? All right, we're going to take a break. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. When we come back, we're going to touch on the next topic, which is Obamacare, union payback, and the comparison between that and capitalism. And I think this is an important segment because there's an organization out there I'm going to talk to you about, but there's a bunch of other organizations that I've already brought to your attention before that'll help you to avoid Obamacare, which are acting in the spirit of capitalism. And so let's talk a little bit about why capitalism works and progressive liberalism, nanny statism, doesn't. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Michael Evans. I'm the host here. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment. We're going to take a hard break. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and also on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. If you want to download podcasts of the show, you can do that directly by going directly to Spreaker.com/America's Voice Now. That's Spreaker, S like speaker, but with an R involved in it. So it's SPR, Spreaker.com/America's Voice Now. There you can just simply download a podcast And once you have that podcast downloaded as an MP3 file, you can play it on any audio device you want, including your mobile phone or what have you at your leisure. Download it on Wi-Fi, put it on your phone, and then you can listen whenever you want. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. We're back. You know, one of the problems I think that we have, and one of the reasons why Americans don't have faith in the conservative ideology that is currently dispensed by the Republican Party, is because they don't have a plan that accurately represents an alternative to Obamacare. And I think that has become a specific area that has injured the Republican Party. Forget the fact that they're all for sale anyway, but let's assume for argument's sake that they were actually operating in our best interest. I know that's a broad leap, but just ride with me for this few moments. Jump with me across the chasm of logic. And let's evaluate this from a objective perspective and assume that, for argument's sake, that the Republicans do truly have America's best interest at heart. The problem that they have is that they are about as creative as the caveman. They're doing the same things the same way that they've been doing them for 1,000 years. And nothing's changed. The truth is, they are not inventive, nor are they creative. And the principles that they are supposed to be espousing and living by and an example of, they've abandoned. The principles of free market capitalism and free enterprise. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, America is confused. Because they see this broad government nanny state taking over every aspect of our lives, and the people who rail against it, their only argument is, this isn't good. Okay, well, show us something better. They can't, because they themselves have abandoned the principles of free market, free enterprise, free market enterprise capitalism. They have abandoned it a long time ago. They're so caught up in the regulatory scheme and the benefits that come with that to them directly as a result of payoffs and bribes that they can no longer even think objectively. And that's the problem. You know what? There's no inventor who would sit there and with a preconceived idea of what he's got to invent, not look at alternatives. He wouldn't get very far. If you were to sit there and you're saying, okay, I'm trying to create a new product here, and I got this great idea, but some people who gave me some money to buy the equipment I need said I can only do it this way, and I know that's going to lead to failure, but they're demanding that I do it this way. So what happens? The greatest invention, maybe, is never realized. And that's the problem we have here. The Republicans are so uncreative that they have not yet, in all of this time, and they've had, I hear people say, oh, the Obama administration's had 3.5 years to fix this website. Guess what? The Republicans have had 3.5 years to come up with an alternative solution to it, And they have utterly, miserably, and epically failed. Not just talking point solutions, real-world solutions. Come up with a bill that says Americans can have health care savings accounts. Come up with solutions that remove regulation and replace innovation, creativity, logic, integrity back into the process. And self-reliance and self-governance. That's what this should really be about. Make people responsible for their own expenses in healthcare, and you'll watch the price of healthcare competitively come down. We've seen so many examples of this, folks. We don't really need another example. Listen, the concepts of free market work like the concepts of gravity. They work every time. Supply and demand. It's one of the oldest concepts going. There's really no other way to look at it. But the government always says, well, we can do it better. Since when? Show me one example where government has actually done anything better than the free market. I can give you a litany of examples, not the least of which is the post office, who's now going to start delivering on Sundays for Amazon. Talk about a last-ditch effort to save your own butt. I mean, unbelievable. You know, the truth is, this administration and all of the liberal progressives out there are, the only thing that they bank on is quid pro quo, this for that. And the perfect example of that is the fact that the Obama administration pressured everyone to actually sign on to Obamacare in the first place with kickbacks and payoffs and threats and coercion and abuse. And quite frankly, the word tyranny should be inserted here. And the other side is that in that claim to get it resolved, they didn't benefit those people who were actually responsible to pay for it all and who are going to have to live under it. But they weren't interested in what was right for you. They were only interested in how could they get their agenda accomplished. The details and the consequences be hanged. Now the labor unions are calling in their chip. We got you elected, and you better do what we're telling you to do. What we're telling you that you're going to do is give us a waiver. Really now? Okay, so let's understand this. Everybody gets a waiver except who? The average American bloke who's getting raked? I mean, come on. Kaiser Health, this is the group that is by both sides of the fence and pretty much everybody involved, the number one group out there who, evaluates healthcare and all the issues surrounding it, right? And they're reporting that in order to pay back his union support, he's about to give them a waiver from this draconian monstrosity. So let's see. Congress is exempt. All of their staff is exempt. The unions are exempt. Religious groups like Islam is exempt, but Christians are not. Big business gets an extra year to evaluate and watch the debacle as it ensues and expands itself, and then they get a determination that they get the time to determine what do we need to do to benefit ourselves. They got a waiver for a year. So they get the chance to assess the damage and then lobby for their changes, which will benefit them. Basically, who's left holding the bag? Yeah, we the people. We get the Obama shaft. The truth is, if we allowed free market and free enterprise and capitalism to operate here, we would have some benefits. Now, I told you all, a couple of weeks ago about 3 different organizations that were out there that offer alternatives that qualify you, by the way, to be exempted from Obamacare by participating in their plan. And what they do is they're not insurance, but what they do is they share costs. These are religious organizations, and they are Christian, by the way, but they've figured out a way, at least until Harry Reid and Nancy get a hold of it and block them, they've figured out a way that you can, it's kind of like self-insure through them, but it qualifies under Obamacare. But there's another organization out there that started up in New York, believe it or not. In New York, probably one of the most liberal, progressive, dominated areas of the country. And they've called it Oscar. This is a startup that may revolutionize healthcare. It's in the New York Post. The article says, starting with the premise that health insurance companies should relieve and not create headaches, a group of venture capitalists and healthcare professionals believe they have the right prescription. This group is actually gotten together, and they've got some really strong legs on this. We're not talking about, a couple of people. They're talking 35,000 doctors and 72 hospitals that anybody who's a policyholder under this Oscar Care or Oscar Healthcare can participate and use. Wow. That's quite a statement. 35,000 doctors and 72 hospitals. And by the way, CVS Pharmacy has, gotten together to be the outlet for their services for prescriptions and things like that, and pharmacy stuff. Now, this is a privately held company, and it was started with, in capitalistic, in capitalistic tones, venture capital money. And they got approval this past summer, from state regulators to open this new insurance company. And all they sell is health care. They've been working on this idea for a decade, and they've raised tens of millions of dollars to start the company. Here's what Kevin Nazemi says. He's one of the co-founders. We simply think that consumers deserve better. We have found very few people who are happy with their existing experience with their health insurance. And that was the drive for us to create something that is transparent. For example, he says, this will include letting consumers know the price of a doctor on one side of the street and the price of a doctor on the other street. We also want to use technology so that consumers feel like he or she has a doctor in the family. Now, when we talk about it from that perspective, you got to recognize that this is the first healthcare insurance company that is beginning operations in New York and the Empire State in a decade. And they're banking their own money on it. Big difference here, folks. They're not banking on the largesse of the nation and the backs of the taxpayers. They're putting their own money there. And that means that under free market principles and free enterprise principles, it will be successful. You know why? It has to be. Unlike the government, where it doesn't really matter whether it's successful or not, free enterprise requires it to be successful, or it goes down in flames. Now, I've heard all the arguments about whether or not free market and free market enterprise and capitalism are good or bad. The truth is, we've actually never found it. We've never experienced it. Not true laissez-faire, free market, free enterprise capitalism. We've never experienced it. Because the government has always got its hand interjected in there somehow or other to change the positioning and to skew the realities of the marketplace. Monopolies, ladies and gentlemen, they can only be created with government not only approval, but assistance. If you don't have government participation, you cannot have a monopoly. You cannot. It's not possible. Because somebody will figure out a way to do it better and faster and cheaper and create a competitive environment that then that company will begin to lose market share. That's the truth. And that's how, frankly, we got along until these guys in government decided to put their clammy mitts into the mix and start to skew and twist and modify everything. I'm not saying that there's not a place for government to oversee that no one is creating a free market capitalistic enterprise that harms others in their attempt to succeed. But I am going to say that setting the tone and the tenor is different than picking the winners and the losers. Big difference. Now, this group includes 35,000 doctors and 72 hospitals that Oscar policyholders can use. CVS Caremark is their pharmacy. You know what? Here's the difference in their attitude versus the Obamacare mandate. Oscar, a privately held company, begins with considerable financial resources and expertise. Its board of directors includes billionaire venture capitalist Vinod Khosla and Charlie Baker, the former head of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. But can it turn a profit? Oscar executives say the challenge of healthcare is the same as that of any other business, namely finding and keeping customers. Not by imprisoning them, but by offering them something better than the competition. Quote, if you are treating your members badly, and a large group of them are leaving each year, and then you have to spend a bunch of money to market to and get new members, then it's hard to build a viable business, says Nazemi. But if you deliver great consumer experience and members stay with you for the long term, then it's a very viable business. Ladies and gentlemen, in an acorn shell, that is and sums up the principles of capitalism. Provide a good quality product that people feel confident that they're getting a good deal, and they will stay with you. Betray that relationship, and they won't. It's that simple. The only time that the entire thing gets shifted around is when government says you can't leave them or they can be the only provider available. Then suddenly everything changes. That's the same argument that I give to having this case that, look, I'll give you, here's the perfect example. One of the things that was talked about before Obamacare came into reality was the idea of opening up insurance companies to offer health insurance services across state lines, right? Here's the perfect example. Obamacare has actually gone further than that. They've restricted not just to within state lines. In some cases, like in California, they've actually restricted it down to the county. In other words, you can't see a doctor or go to a hospital or use a medical facility outside of the immediate area you live in. That's even more draconian than the original healthcare plans that were out there in the first place. How absurd. So we took what everybody considered to be a logical step of saying, well, let's just open up the insurance policies, the insurance companies, to offer policies across state lines. And first of all, that will enable competition. And we said, and with Obamacare, we said, nope, let's narrow it even further and double down on what we know to be a disastrous policy that we can already see the fruits of. How ridiculous. Meanwhile, the unions are doing exactly the opposite. They're lobbying their money not to create something better, but to say, we don't really care what you created, just make sure that we're not a part of it. And don't forget, by the way, that we're the ones who paid your way to put you here. Wow. Wow. Look at the difference there, huh? You know why? Because unions aren't free market either, are they? Think about that for a moment. What's free market and free enterprise about a union that says you must join in order to work here, and you must pay dues because you're a member, and we get to use that money for our own purposes and our own agenda, which ultimately we tell you will trickle down to you, but you have no assurance of that. And if you opt out or you object, too bad. Now, who's dictatorial and who's free enterprise now, huh? You see, unions are government in microcosm. Albeit, they have a much more focused agenda. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But they utilize the principles of coercion and pressure to accomplish the task, which is to make you enslaved to an agenda that is not your own. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference. And capitalism is now such a dirty word in our society because of the liberal progressive agenda and the way that the leftists have driven that concept home to most Americans. Ask Americans on the street. Do yourself a favor and do your own little poll. In the next 48 hours, just go up to 10 people that you know but don't really have a day in and day out relationship with, and ask them what they think of capitalism. First of all, out of the 10, you'll be lucky if you can get 6 or 7 who actually even understand the market and the concepts of capitalism. Most people don't. You know why? Because our schools don't teach it. You know why? Because the teachers' unions don't want it taught. You know why? Because it is not conducive to their agenda to show something like competition. They don't want competition. Unions thrive in a vacuum of competition. That is their exclusive domain. Excuse me. And the truth is, what we have is an administration that operates on the same principles, paying off a benefactor at your cost and expense. Because remember that unions, although they're only 11% of the American population, the workers within unions, for those people to opt out of Obamacare means that the rest of us got to pick up their 11% lack of or slack. Oh, didn't think of it that way, did you? You see, every person who gets opted out means the rest of us got to carry a greater amount of weight. So here we are on a journey, and we're going across the nation, and everybody's got a knapsack on. Here we are, a bunch of military guys, and everybody's carrying a 100-pound pack. But some guys go up to the leader of the platoon, and they say, "Hey, listen, you know, I've done some good things for you in the past, and this pack is awful bad. So why don't you take my pack and divvy it up amongst the other guys and make them carry my weight?" Because that's what's happening, America. Every person who gets opted out, who waves out, that means you're going to carry more weight of this. And you don't have an option. You're doing it under orders. It's different if you said, "Hey, listen, Bob, I see you're struggling there. Let me carry some of that stuff for you." It's different if Bob says, "Hey, listen, I am having a really hard time here because I got this bad knee. So I'll tell you what, anybody who wants to carry 11% of my pack, I'll pay you." And half a dozen guys say, "Okay, I'll take some." That's different. That's capitalism. But when the sergeant comes back down the line and he says, "Bob doesn't want to carry this pack, and you guys are going to split it up, and you're going to carry it," and everybody says, "Wait a minute, why does he get a break?" It doesn't matter why he gets a break. I'm the sergeant. This is what I'm telling you is going to happen, and that's the way it is. Wow. Whole different tone, isn't it? The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, if we allowed capitalism to operate, if the Republicans, who staunchly advocate capitalism, or at least verbally, they don't believe in it and they don't follow the mantra of it, and they don't actually ever exercise it, but if they did, assuming we can leap the chasm of logic here, or their illogical behavior in the face of their own verbal pronouncements, then let's take a look at what the Republican Party can do to salvage itself. They won't, but let's just look at it objectively for a moment. The first things that they can do would be to say that we're going to do the right thing by the principles of capitalism, which will ultimately achieve our goal of allowing the most Americans to gain health insurance at the lowest possible cost. Isn't that really the whole idea of Obamacare, at least in concept? Now, granted, it looks like a shiny gold orb, but as you get closer, you see it's all pockmarked and full of cuts and bruises and bangs. Because the way that they're accomplishing it is not by free and open marketplace, it's by oppression. If they really truly wanted the lowest possible cost for the greatest number of people, there's plenty of ways to accomplish that utilizing the principles of free market. But these guys are so sold out to the entities that benefit from the lack of a free market, and they're so conditioned to utilize government intervention to achieve its own skewed viewpoint. Everybody in politics looks at every situation kind of like a Picasso painting. It's all out of sync. It's all out of whack. It's the whole concept is off. You ever see that painting where the clock is melting over the face of the corner of the table, and the trees are all skewed and they're all out of shape and they're not in proportion? That's how they view the world. The rest of us look at it and say, no, that's a clock hanging on the wall. And they see it as some LSD-induced hallucination. Why? Because they've been paid to look at it that way. And the money is coursing through their veins like the LSD is coursing through the twisted mind of the hallucinogenic. It's no different. They cannot look clearly at it until they have been purged of the mind-altering substance. What is that mind-altering substance? Money, power, influence. That's it. If the Republicans truly cared about, one, saving themselves, and two, saving the nation, doing the real work of the nation, they would come up with an alternative solution. And there are lots of brilliant minds out there who have them. I mean, the first guy who jumps to mind is Dr. Ben Carson and his promotion of the idea of health savings accounts. All right, so the poor don't have them. Great, we'll give them a tax credit to cover it. Maybe we'll actually give them the cash back at the end of the year to cover it or something. I don't care. But the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, it would be infinitely less expensive for the rest of America if we did it that way. And we would incorporate and enhance our freedom, our liberty, our privacy, and we would reduce the level of government intervention in our lives. You see, those four principles tell you why it will never work with either the Democrats or the Republicans. Because once we leap back across the chasm, we look at the reality of the situation and we recognize it for what it is. Both parties are either subverted and diverted from reality, either by ideological imbibing of the hallucinogen or the imbibing of it from just a sheer greed perspective. But both people have taken the mind-altering drug, and we're left with the skewed results of their view. And that is a shame. If America ever wants to succeed, we have got to get a true group of individuals who accurately represent our own interests and our own needs in this nation. And what we have today, the current crop, is so poisoned that I'll tell you right now, you eat any of the fruit off of that vine, and you're eating off the fruit of the tree of treason, number one. And number two, it's poison. It is poison. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to tackle our last topic of this morning, the Ministry of Propaganda's credibility or lack thereof. And I got to tell you, there was an excellent article about how the New York Times cheerleading for Obama is harming the nation by Michael Goodwin from the New York Post. Again, I referenced this in the very beginning of the show. This is an excellent article, and I really want you to take a look at it because I think it really hits the nail on the head and expresses the truth of where we are today. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web by visiting our website at americasvoicenow.org. You can go to .com, too. It'll take you to the same place. You can contact me to give me your feedback on this and any other program that we do by sending me an email to mike at americasvoicenow.org. And agree with me, disagree with me, either is okay. I want to hear your feedback. All right, did you like the show? Is it good? Does it help you? Does it give you information that you didn't have before? Does it motivate you to go out there and do your own homework to formulate your own opinion? Does it help you in some way? Does it hurt you? I want to hear your opinions. Tell me. You can send them to me at mike at americasvoicenow.org. You can also find us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And there you can, if you're a member of Facebook, click the like button and join with us. If not, you can still see and review the articles, comments, ideas, and stories that we post up there every day. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hang on to your seats. When we come back, the Ministry of Propaganda's lack of credibility. We'll be right back. All right. As promised, we're here. You know, Michael Goodwin writes for the Post. He wrote an excellent article called "The New York Times Obama Cheerleading Harms the Nation." And he specifically addressed a lot of his complaints to the Times, but he wasn't. I think his concept is representative across the entire spectrum of the press as a generalization. And I don't think it's unfair for us to use the broad brush to generalize the Ministry of Propaganda. Because as an organized mainstream media, and I know that the borders of that are a little fuzzy, but the truth of the matter is, when you look at who owns the industry and media, there's about 6 or 8 companies that basically control everything you see, everything you hear, everything you learn. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not a good place for America to be. You know, we should have the capability and the wherewithal to have enough information to be able to formulate our own opinions. And this article in the Post hits the nail on the head. Goodwin is on fire in his review of how sycophantic the New York Times has been as the, quote, official arm of the Ministry of Propaganda that's pumping up and promoting the Obama regime. Now, I grant you, these papers do compete. So, you know, there's probably some argument to be made that, you know, they're throwing their opponents under the bus. And it's okay. That's where you wear your critical thinking hat. You go into it with eyes wide open and you say, okay, I'm going to read this article in its totality, and then I'm going to make my determination based on all of the available information I can gather. And that's not just from one article or 2 or 5 or even 10. Study to show yourself approved. Right? This guy opens this article in a pretty good way. Poor Barack Obama. When I first read that, I had to laugh out loud. Ending his 5th year as the world's most powerful man, he is running out of scapegoats and fairy tales. Blaming George Bush has lost its punch, and the Obamacare debacle is shredding the myth that he is competent and honest. Still, before he rides off into the sunset of self-pity and low poll ratings, he ought to invite his remaining friends over for a heart-to-heart. That way he can tell the New York Times that its fanatical support does him no favors. Instead, it feeds his arrogance and reinforces his belief that he can solve any problem with any speech. The unflattering truth doesn't stand a chance until it is too late. Not that the president would admit to any of that, of course, but the Obama protection racket, led by the New York Times, cuts both ways. It's a key reason he has defied political gravity for so long, and also why he is now in deep trouble. As watchdogs become lapdogs, the presidential bubble grew impenetrable, isolating him from ordinary Americans and the trickle-down pain of his policies. From the broadcast networks to MSNBC and most large papers, Obama got the benefit of every doubt. The double standards were a daily disgrace so routine, they mostly provoked a shrug instead of outrage. The Obamacare debacle is the exception that proves the rule. Wall-to-wall complaints are forcing the media to report that the law's website is a lemon and that its rules are causing millions of people to lose insurance plans they liked. The mainstream media is acting only because the story is too big to ignore. Had it been mildly skeptical sooner, it could have exposed the law's destructive rules and prevented the disaster. Yet the Times, especially its editorial page, remains his most devoted cheerleader. The latest example is embarrassing enough to make even a gray lady blush. After the president's repeated promise that if you like your health care plan, you can keep it was proven false, the editorial page tried to clean up this mess. On November 2nd, it charged that Republicans were stoking, quote, consumer fears and confusion, end quote, by highlighting reports of people losing insurance. Then came the cover-up. Mr. Obama clearly misspoke when he made those promises, the editorial said, before dismissing the problem as an overblown controversy. The misspoke defense set off a firestorm, and even the paper's gentle public editor suggested it was too kind. Naturally, the editors defended their decision not to accuse the president of an outright lie. Yet even Obama concluded he had to apologize. His recognition of the uproar will result in changes, if only because Senate Democrats are now running for their lives. The episode graphically illustrates how the Times has harmed the nation by reflexively protecting Obama, facts be damned. Instead of just expressing its own liberal view, the editorial page serves as the propaganda arm of the administration, the Jay Carney of print media. Its daily drumbeat of shrill partisanship leaves it indistinguishable from Dem Party hacks who spend their waking hours demonizing Republicans. The ritual is distressingly clear. Any White House claim that a critic is, quote, political, sends the Times to war. The news pages play along by treating Obama's every utterance as if it was sacred, thus crowding out the facts that don't fit his agenda. This power to shape the narrative is not limited to its own pages. The newspaper's brand still commands significant cachet that stories it downplays, such as the Benghazi terror attack or the IRS targeting of conservative groups, quickly disappear from the other media as well. And that lets the president off the hook and keeps much of the public in the dark. At least that was the pattern until now. Obamacare is such a direct hit on so many people that it could change everything. If predictions are accurate, the tens of millions of families will lose their current insurance policies, but Obama and the Democratic lemmings will be seriously damaged. The lapdogs and cheerleaders won't get off that easy either, not when their crime has been covering up his. Boom. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth of this is that the media, and the media at large, and I'm talking about all of the news media that you see on television. There is not a single network news media that you see on television today that is giving you the raw, unvarnished truth. Sometimes by commission, most times by omission. What's the difference? Well, the idea of commission means, like MSNBC, what they're actually doing is sitting there and twisting the facts to give you the impression that something is different than it really is. Omission is Communist News Network, and Fox News for that matter, who will sit there and literally avoid stories and fill it up with pabulum and chalk to make up the difference. How do I know that? Well, perfect example is Common Core. The idea of Common Core is so destructive on its face with that when Americans recognize somewhere down the road of the damage that Common Core has wreaked upon our nation, they will be infuriated. The problem is that generations of our children will be indoctrinated to the point of no restoration. And Fox News is completely avoiding it. You almost barely ever hear a blip about the term Common Core, yet the nation is up in arms about it. And on the other side of the fence, most of the media doesn't talk about it either, including Communist News and MSNBC and ABC, CBS, NBC, blah, 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 blah. So that's an act of omission. They refuse to tell you what's really happening. And that is an act of commission to let you be misled by omission. So either way you look at it, the truth of the matter is, and by the way, the reason Fox News doesn't do that, because a lot of conservative folks watch Fox News and they think that that's the only straight-out media out there. I got to tell you, you're being misled there too. The leaders of Fox News, Ailes and Murdoch, are both deeply up to their elbows in Common Core. Yeah. That's why you're not hearing about it, because they're not going to throw their own policy under the bus, which shows you that their integrity is lacking as well. The only place you're hearing about it is in alternative media. And I grant you, remember I said earlier in this particular broadcast topic that the lines of what constitutes mainstream media are a little rough around the edges. They're a little fuzzy. That's because, ladies and gentlemen, that alternative media is becoming such a big marketplace and stealing such market share from the mainstream media that they're actually becoming mainstream themselves. Yes, they are. Now, does that mean that they are capitulating? I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to keep track of them all. That's for you to decide, wearing your critical thinking cap. Spin your propeller and determine what's legitimate and what's not. But I can tell you this. The mainstream media is actively working and engaged in either one, obtaining your misinformation and designing and creating it, or they are directly involved in refusing to give you the truth for fear that you'll take action with that knowledge. The simple truth is, there is no mainstream media that is willing to support the real true concepts of why this country was created the way it was. None of them are actually standing on the pillars of the Constitution. None of them are holding this administration accountable. None of them. And none of them are also truly giving you the real information that you need in order to make those decisions about who to support and what policies to support. They bring on endless pundits who sit there and talk about talking points and kind of indoctrinate you into a way of thinking that is not accurate. It's only a transference, like a Spock Vulcan mind meld. It's a transference of their opinion into your mind. At least Spock could only read your mind. These guys have the ability to actually push the idea into your head. That's why I encourage so strongly that you look for alternative media sources. Because you cannot trust what these people are promoting and promulgating. They're feeding you lies, misrepresentation, misdirection, and pabulum to keep you calm. You know, I watch. The only thing I watch on television is news. Period. End of argument. I never watch sitcoms. I can't take it. To me, it is so. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard to watch that kind of thing. Because it's so canned and it's obviously so faked and it's so laden with bias and the idea of indoctrinating you into thinking one way or the other. It's been so infiltrated by the progressivist and liberal thinking and the political correctness and all that. It tastes like vomit in my mouth. So I can't take it. The only thing I watch on television is news. Period. And I watch a lot of different channels because I try to get an overall understanding of where they're each coming from. Time from time, of course, I latch on to Communist News Network. I have to observe what they're up to. And I got to tell you, I find it so disturbing because they call themselves the most trusted name in news. And the last thing they give you is news. I mean, they're giving you news if what you're interested in is, you know, some article that has really nothing to do with it's more public interest type stories than they are with investigative reporting. There's no investigative reporting going on there in any way, shape, or form at all. I mean, there's plenty of stuff about, you know, the happy-go-lucky story about some new medical device they came out with and that kind of thing. But when it comes to those things that affect your life in the political arena, they're bare naked. Literally bare naked. At best, they give it a glancing blow, if they even glance at it. And when they do give it to you, the pundits that they bring on who are in support of their own agenda, I mean, if you were to think that if that was the only news source you had, you would think that this was, you know, some kind of utopian fantasy land we're living in. The truth is far more stark and far more dangerous and far more sinister than they would have you to believe. They're all guilty of it, but some are more guilty than others. I mean, there's one thing I can say about MSNBC. I disagree with almost everything that they stand for. But the one thing that I can say about MSNBC is that they don't try to hide the fact that they're biased. They come right out and say it. And I've got to give them credit, at least for the integrity to stand up and say, for that aspect of integrity, that allows them to stand up and say, we're cheering for this administration because we think leftism and progressivism and big government are best. Let somebody else make your decisions for you. They at least openly come out and say that. Nobody else has the courage and or the honesty to tell their viewers what's really going on. Now, I'll grant you, MSNBC has a pretty horrific, ranking or viewership. But that's because, to be honest with you, I think we are overly influenced by a tiny minority of true leftist progressivists. It's like the idea of all of the gay rights thing. I mean, assuming for argument's sake, the numbers are accurate, and I've heard they're 10 to 11% that is the LGBT community or whatever, right? That's a fairly small minority to have such massive effect on our entire society. Really is. And you can say the same thing for Hispanics and immigration. You can say the same thing for blacks and the issue of racial discrimination. I mean, blacks accordingly are, I think it's 18 or 19 or maybe 20% or something like that. And Hispanics are a little bit above that now. So why is it that our entire society, the other 80%, are forced to accept the ideas that go beyond fairness and go towards actually leaning in the direction of unfairness, but the other way? Let me explain that one to me. Because the media is propping it up and supporting it and driving it into your face all the time. They're not giving you an opportunity to see an unvarnished reality. They're only giving you the opportunity to see their viewpoint and how they want you to think. The truth is, immigration is not good for America. Not this kind of immigration with this kind of a comprehensive. It's good for America in the sense that we want immigrants to come here, but we want them to come here under our terms, not their terms. The truth is, everybody ought to be saying the same thing. What's in the best interest of America is that we stop the bleeding and seal the border. After that, we can have any discussion you want. Why can't we have that? Because the people who are giving you the information don't believe that there should be any borders. They don't want borders. And they're so drunk on the Kool-Aid of this can't we all just get along mentality, kumbaya, that, the truth is they're never going to give you a true and unvarnished look at the issue. They cover up the fact that by allowing literally tens of millions of illegals in here, you're impacting the workforce of the people who were born here and who, quite frankly, pay the freight. They lie to you and tell you that immigration's good for you. I could say the same things about any other topic. I mean, just using that as an example. And I'm not trying to throw any one group under the bus. All I'm saying is this. How is it that a small minority of radical leftists have hijacked the entire nation of the United States? The media. That's how. They've got the soapbox. They've got the loudspeaker. And when they're standing up on their soapbox with a bullhorn, they can reach more people than you can locked in the phone booth that you have been placed into. The three people around you can hear you yelling and screaming through the glass, but everybody else is deafened to your truth. And the mainstream media, they've got an entire sound system that they can be heard for blocks. You know what? It's up to you to identify those things that are truth. The only way you're going to do that is by investigating and understanding and looking and paying attention to what's going on around you. To be situationally aware so that when you do hear a story that leaves you kind of scratching your head doing that tilted head dog thing, that you recognize that there is an alternative solution out there or a truth that's being withheld from you. In order to be objective, and the only way that you're ever going to be able to make an informed decision is to be objective, you have to study both sides of the issue. Maybe 8 sides of the issue. Maybe the multitudinous facets of the diamond of the issue. We don't all have to be, rocket scientists, and we don't all have to be experts on everything. but we have to be well-rounded enough in our knowledge that we're able to jump from topic to conversation to topic so that we can have a well-rounded view that doesn't come from this myopic perspective that we refuse to allow ourselves to reach beyond. I posted something up on our Facebook page the other day that somebody disagreed with because one of the links I put at the bottom of the story was from a media organization he didn't agree with. He thought it was thin. And the truth is, that just happened to be the story I posted. But that wasn't the entire context of the story. That story was put together, and the reason I did that topic, and it was all about this issue of what's going on with nuclear weapons and the fact that this was related to the article of what I did last week with how Russia and China smell blood in the water, and they're circling around America. And I stand by that. I'm telling you right now, I've gone out there and read lots and lots and lots of articles, but I'm limited on Facebook to being able to post one or two. My job is not to get you to reiterate and absorb and adopt my opinion. My job is to motivate you to say, wow, I didn't know that. Let me go do some homework on it. That's the goal. Don't adopt my opinion. Formulate your own. Don't even believe what I say. Don't believe what I think. Don't believe what I believe. Believe what you believe. Just make sure that you've got a foundation for it that's rock solid from top to bottom. If you've got that, you win. If you don't, you don't even know you've lost. You may not necessarily agree with my assertions, and you may not agree with the conclusions that I draw. I don't say you have to. I do say that you should take what I submit out there, and it's my Facebook page, so I put up there what I think is appropriate. But that doesn't mean that that's what you should think is appropriate. The truth is that, if you really, truly are interested in knowledge, you take everything that you learn as a starting point to learn more. It should only open up another door that suddenly opens it's the door to the next library, which is full of volumes of knowledge. If I post a story up there that you don't like because you don't agree with the concept, I mean, or the source of it, I mean, he said, this is ridiculous. Found you through another group. But if this is the kind of crap you're going to post, you won't last long on my feed. Try some real sources. Well, guess what? There are tons and tons of sources out there. My job is not to tell you what to think. My job is to get you to say, wow, if that's the case, I'm going to go do some homework on my own. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between critical thinking and the crap that the mass media is feeding you, and this administration's been feeding you, and the 10 previous administrations before that have been feeding America. That's the difference between what your kids are going to learn in Common Core and what they've learned in the past. I'm not asking you to make me your source. I'm just throwing out the nugget of gold out there so that you can pick it up and say, wow, where did he find this? Let me do some homework and investigation, see if I can find some more. You see, if you're not willing to do that, then that tells me that you're willing to parrot someone else's opinion and adopt that as your own. And that tells me that you will never have a good foundational understanding of where we are, how we got here, what we do, why we do it, and what we should do to continue to move forward positively. Remember that what's in your best interest as an average regular guy is for the most part what's in the nation's best interest. I'm going to leave you with a quote that's not really relevant to this, but I thought it matters because it kind of puts into perspective the issue of our relationship in the overall scheme of things. And it kind of brings us back down and grounds us out. And I think if more Americans followed this mantra, this idea, this concept, they would be a little bit more willing to think outside the box that they have put themselves in. They would be willing to look at alternatives, other ideas and concepts, and look at them objectively without having to say, I reject everything else I've ever believed before because of this new piece of information. That's not how we do things. Science doesn't work that way. They take every new snippet of information that comes in and they add to that knowledge. But this quote from William Ellery is may not be the most appropriate quote, but I liked it and I thought it was relevant to this situation. To live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury, and refinement rather than fashion, to be worthy, not respectable and wealthy, not rich, to study hard, think quietly, talk gently, act frankly, to listen to stars and birds, to babes and sages, with open heart, to bear all cheerfully, do all bravely, await occasions, hurry never. In a word, to let the spiritual, unbidden, and unconscious grow up through the common. This is to be my symphony. Some of that is directly relevant to the idea of moving through this world and knowing what our place is and how we're supposed to interact. It's okay to be content with small means. America has gotten into this idea that you can't live by small means. You can't seek elegance. You've got to seek luxury. Everybody's got to live like a king. How about being refined? Refined in your concepts and your ideas, rather than to be whimmy on fashion. What's in fashion? What's in vogue? And to be worthy. You don't have to be, you don't have to always be at the forefront of the pack. We chase the almighty dollar and sacrifice everything else in our lives in order to accomplish that. And most of our motivations and a lot of our ideas and beliefs are motivated and directed by that. How about studying hard to understand who we are, where we are in this place, and what we can do to change things for our own and the nation's best interest? And I don't mean that selfishly. To study hard and to think quietly, to speak gently, to act frankly, with an open heart, to bear it all cheerfully, do it bravely, and do it bravely. Remember that. That should be our symphony. That should be what our goals are. To improve ourselves while not necessarily trampling on everybody else to get there. To be counted, to be fearless, to be courageous, to be fierce, and to speak out even when our voice shakes. Thanks for joining with us today. You've been listening to America's Voice. My name is Mike Evans. I'm the host here, and I thank you for your attendance with us this morning. God bless you and have a great day. See you tomorrow morning. You can find us on the web by visiting us at americasvoicenow.org. You can find our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And then you can find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. You can also find and download our audio podcast at Spreaker.com/America's Voice Now. Spreaker is Spreaker. Spreaker.com/America's Voice Now. Download a podcast onto your phone or an iPod or something like that, and you can listen to it at your own leisure. Thanks for joining with us today. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.